All rise, vous vous levez. Please be seated.
Mr. McCloskey, if you take until 2 o'clock, then Mr. Tiga has some time to go beyond his assessment as well.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
So now we're at the 14th of July. So Mladić is at the main staff command the morning of the 14th as the massive work pursuant to murder operation continues, most clearly in the enormous convoy and buses and trucks from Bratunats taking men to the schools in the Zvornik area, led by Popovich, men that would be killed at Arahovac that day, Petkovsky that night, and onward. Mladić travels the same route as the convoy early in the afternoon of the 14th. As he's going by Zvornik, it's roughly the same time people are being murdered at Arahovac, not far away. It's inconceivable that Mladić's forces are engaged in this massive murder operation with him in the area and him not fully informed, involved, and in command. Mladić remained in command and control of the VRS while he was in Belgrade, with no other officers standing in for him. I'll refer you to that, to our brief 1325 to 1327. But I'll remind you of the testimony of Colonel Mladić, his chief of operation, who was asked by Mr. Lukic about the issue of Mladić's absence and standing in, at transcript pages 14543 to 44. Mr. Mladić asked, would going to Serbia be considered absent? Colonel Mladić answered, and I quote, it doesn't depend on the whereabouts of the commander, but it depends on the duration of absence. The trial chamber then queried the witness on what time period this would be. And Mladić answered, a week or so, to my mind. As you know, even by the defense count, Mladić would only have been in Belgrade a bit more than 3 days. In any event, Mladić could have been in a coma from the late afternoon of the 14th July, and he would have still been criminally responsible for his involvement in the developing and implementing the JCE to eliminate from 11 July through 14 July. And there's no real issue of alibi here. Finally, I would like to finish my discussion of the evidence with 3 intercepts. But first I want to tell you the story that these intercepts reveal, and then we'll go over them. On the 13th of July, when the massive numbers of Muslims were being captured along the road and Beria was so involved, he needed help to execute people, and he received an order from Mladić to brigade commander of the Visegrad Brigade, Radomir Fortula. Mladić ordered Fortula to provide him with 30 men from his unit to assist Beara. That day, the men were loaded on a bus in Visegrad, headed up, and soon after that, their bus broke down. And by the evening of 13 July, they still hadn't been retrieved, and nobody knows what they did after that. But Beara never got them. So by 15 July, after the men at Arahovac had been killed, the men in Petkovsky had been killed, there were still over 800 men needing to be killed at Kozluk, at the Rochevich school, and over 1,700 people that are backed up at the Pilica school and the Pilica dome. And as you will remember, the Muslim column is now approaching Zvornik and is a real threat to Zvornik. Minko Pandurovic gets called back to help defend Zvornik. Other troops are going in to fight the column. At the same time, the murder operation is occurring, taking tremendous resources. And Beara is very frustrated. He has got all of these well over 2,000 people that he needs to kill, and he's pulling his hair out. So he gets on the phone looking for Jivanovic, who he thinks is still the corps commander. He's calling from Drago Nikolić's office at the Zvornik Brigade. Jivanovic tells him he can't do that anymore, and he refers him to Krstić's extension 385. And Beara gets on the line with Krstić and says the same thing he'd said to Jivanovic, that Fortula did not follow the boss's order, referring the boss as to be Mladić, as Jivanovic had referred to him before. They go back and forth and back and forth. Krstić tells him to check with various brigade commanders, the Zvornik Brigade, the Bratunac Brigade, the Mladić Brigade. Beara says, no, they won't do it, they can't do it. He says, well, talk to those guys at the MOOP. They can't do it either, and they're very frustrated. Finally, it ends with Beara saying, look, I have 3,500 parcels to deliver, and I have no solution. These are the men in Kozluk and the men in Pilica. Krstić ends it with, well, now I'm going to be the one to blame. Worried about being blamed by Mladić. And says, I'll see what I can do. The next day, 16 July, the main staff 10th Sabotage Unit comes and assists at Branjevo Farm. That was the information fundamentally provided by Mr. Butler and some of the evidence. But let's now take a look at the intercepts.
Before we do, can you please look at page 65, line 16, and the number 17 there? Is that what you had said?
Yes, I'm sorry. When I said over 800 men needing to be killed, I was speaking in the context of Beara, who felt
Sure.
he needed to kill.
The 800 is there. Look at 17.
Oh, it should be 1,700.
Thank you. That's what I thought I heard.
Thank you very much. And you'll recall that number from the number of people exhumed from the Branjevo Farm mass grave.
Let's move on.
Okay, let's go to the slide of the first. This is just a short reference that shows that at 9:52 hours, Beara is looking for Jivanovic and wants him to call him at 139. 139 is Drago Nikolić's extension at the Zvornik Brigade. There's other evidence that that's where Beara is at the time. So let's go to the next slide. I won't go over all of it, but you can see Beara saying, you know, that day I informed the commander about it. Fortula didn't send Lukic's intervention platoon. Fortula, Dragomir Fortula, commander of the Visegrad Brigade. Lukic, Milan Lukic, an infamous person from Visegrad. And Lukic is waiting at Blagojevic's. That would be Blagojevic of the Bratunac Brigade. Beara says, Lukic is here with me and his driver, and we urge that. He's a bit more complaining about Fortula. And then Beara says, he simply doesn't give a damn about what the commander ordered him to do. Well, now that platoon has 60 men. That is a reference to the Mladić's order to Fortula to give Beara 60 men. And then Beara goes down and says, have him send me at least half. And then finally, Jivanovic says, I can't decide that anymore. Now, you remember, this is 15 July. Jivanovic was removed from commander on the night of the 13 July. So he can't make decisions for Beara anymore. And also, this is a fundamentally exposes the appropriate and proper chain of command, not like anything else. This is a main staff security officer. He is having to go to the corps commander to get the corps commander to issue orders to his brigades. Bayar, the colonel, can't do it himself. The commander is the one that's in charge. This idea that Mladić is out of the loop and that the security branch can run the whole show is absurd. So finally, at the end, we see that Jivanovic refers him to 385, Zlatar, that's the Drina Corps extension, and to ask for 385. We know from other evidence that that's where Krstić can be reached. Okay, so now let's...
Mr. McCloskey, when you read, have him send at least half, you added the word me, whether it makes any differences, but if you quote, if you read literally, I would like you to do that very precisely. At least that's what I heard you say. Let him send me, that's what you said, whereas the text reads, let him send. Maybe the same,
No,
if you read.
Yeah, I am working in my argument throughout this, and
Yes.
I don't mean to be to mislead you like that.
Yeah.
What
No,
I
it's-
think
it's
he
fine.
meant by that was send them
that's-
to me.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. All right. So now, naturally, we see him, Bayara, get connected to Krstić. So let's go to the next, which is P2126. And this is at 1000 hours on the 15th. And Bayara tells Krstić, General, Fertula didn't carry out the boss's order. Again, this is a refer to Mladić's order to Fertula. Krstić says, listen, he ordered him to lead out a tank, not a train. This is an indication Krstić is fully aware of Mladić's order to Fertula. It appears that Krstić is making a veiled reference about the number or the size of what was ordered. And then Bayara, and I say he's frustrated in pulling his hair out because then he just boldly says, but I need 30 men, just like it was ordered. And then Krstić says, take from Mladić or Blagojevic. You may remember Mladić is the commander of the Mladić Brigade. Blagojevic is the commander of the Bratunac Brigade. Krstić says, I can't pull anything out of here for you. This is day 2 of the attack on Žepa, where Krstić had to send his best unit, Pandurovic, back to Zvornik. So Krstić isn't being really generous with his troops at this point for Bayara and the murder operation. Then Bayara responds, but I don't have any here. I need them today, and I'll give them back tonight. Kurle, that's Krstić's nickname. These guys know each other. You have to understand. I can't explain it to you like this. Krstić, I'll disturb everything on his axis if I pull them out, and a lot depends on him. So axis, as you know, axis of attack. Krstić is concerned about his attack on Žepa. And then Bayara says openly, I can't resolve anything without 15 to 30 men and Boban Injic. Now, we've learned from Butler and other evidence in this case, Boban Injic is an officer from Visegrad. And then Krstić says, Lubo, this is not protected. Clearly, they both know this is an unprotected line, and they're arrogant officers, and they just can't help themselves. I don't know why they're doing it, but they do. Bayara says, I know. And then Krstić goes on, talks more about Mladić and Blagojevic. And then, interestingly, Bayara says, but I don't have any. If I did, I wouldn't still be asking for the 3rd day. Now, I'm not great with arithmetic, but if he's asking for this on the 15th, and it's the 3rd day, the 13th would be the day that he originally asked for these troops. And of course, that's the day we know that thousands of Muslim prisoners are arriving and need to be dealt with. Then Krstić goes back to Blagojevich and his Red Berets and go to the MUP, the Ministry of Interior. Behar responds, no, they won't do anything. I talked to them. There's no other solution but for 15 to 30 men. Behar's negotiating. He's gone from 60, now he needs 15 to 30. And then he says, the thing that was supposed to arrive on the 13th but didn't, okay, boom, that confirms. That's when he was asking, that's when he got the order, that's when they were supposed to arrive. And then Krstić, Lubo, you have to understand me. You're done fucking all sorts to me, something like that. Behar, I understand, but you have to understand me too. Had this been done, we wouldn't be arguing. Had this been done then, we wouldn't be arguing over it now. Behar, I can't argue with Krstić either. Krstić, fuck it. Now I'll be the one to blame. They're both scared of Mladić, that they're going to blame them for not taking part in the murder operation. Behar, I don't know what to do. I mean it, Curly. There are still 3,500 parcels that I have to distribute, and I have no solution. Fuck it. I'll see what I can do. After that, over 800 men were killed that afternoon at Kozluk by elements of the Rochevich battalion. But then on the 16th, over 1,700 men were killed at the Branjevo farm by the 10th Sabotage Detachment and people from Bratunac. Now, lastly, so there is no concern that Fertula didn't carry out Mladić's orders. Let's see the last intercept, P1285. Importantly, at 19 hours. We don't know who these guys are, but you can see that someone's looking for a bus and to send the bus towards Visegrad, Podramania, Rogatica, and further on. That is way down if you look at a map, well beyond, down past these areas, a long distance from Bratunac. When he comes across a bus with a group of soldiers, those are the ones from Visegrad. Boban is their commander. Say again? Okay, here they are again. Boban Injic. And then bring them to the command in Bratunac. Well, those guys, evening's coming, sitting by a broken bus in the afternoon, soldiers just, who knows where they went, but they didn't see Behar. Those compelling intercepts leave no doubt whatsoever. Mladić is issuing orders pursuant to the murder operation. Now finally, I would like to conclude my remarks with some words to the women of Srebrenica and others that have suffered and continue to suffer from Mladić's crimes. But it's the Srebrenica and Žepa women where my team have for over 20 years spoken to you, listened to you, learned from you. And we've been privileged to bring some of you here to The Hague to share with this tribunal your experience, your pain, and your incredible courage facing down the people that committed this genocide. We've also spoken to your precious few men and boys who survived the killing fields from Kravica to Branjevo. From all of you, we've learned so much. One thing we've learned about your husbands and your sons, was their fear of not being able to say goodbye to you. And we know you felt and still feel that terrible pain. So I looked and looked for someone who may have been able to put something down on a scrap of paper or something for you. But of course, they were never given a chance to even hold a pencil. I did find something, though. I had to go to another place, another time, another terrible war. But I found a letter from a husband, a soldier, who was able to say goodbye to his wife. And I believe his words and feelings are those your husbands and sons and brothers would have sent to you had they had a chance. I'll read you parts of this letter that was written on the 14th of July, 1861. My very dear Sarah, indications are very strong that we shall move in a few days, perhaps tomorrow. Lest I should not be able to write you again, I feel impelled to write lines that may fall under your eye when I shall be no more. If it is necessary that I should fall on the battlefield, I am ready. I have no misgivings about or lack of confidence in the cause in which I am engaged. My courage does not halt or falter. But my dear wife, when I know that with my own joys I lay down nearly all of yours and replace them in this life with cares and sorrows. As for our little boys, they will grow up as I have done and never know a father's love and care. God's blessing upon them. Sarah, my love, for you is deathless. My love for you is deathless. It seems to bind me to you with mighty cables that nothing but omnipotence could break. The memories of the blissful moments I have spent with you come creeping over me, and I feel most gratified to God and to you that I have enjoyed them so long. And hard it is for me to give them up and burn to ashes the hopes of future years, when, God willing, we might still have lived and loved together and seen our sons grow up to honorable manhood around us. My dear Sarah, never forget how much I love you, and when my last breath escapes me on the battlefield, I will whisper your name. Forgive my many faults and my many pains I have caused you. How thoughtless and foolish I have oftentimes been. How gladly would I wash out with my tears every little spot on your happiness and struggle with all the misfortunes of this world, to shield you and my children from harm. But I cannot. I must watch you from the spirit land and hover near you while you buffet the storms with your precious little freight, and wait with sad patience till we meet to part no more. But, oh Sarah, if the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they love, I shall always be near you, in the garish day and in the darkest night, amidst your happiest scenes and gloomiest hours, always, always. And if there be a soft breeze upon your cheek, it shall be my breath. Or the cool air fans your throbbing temple, it shall be my spirit passing by. Sarah, do not mourn me dead. Think I am gone, and wait for me, for we shall meet again. Sullivan Ballou died 1 week later at a place called Bull Run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCloskey. Mr. Tiga.
No one can fathom the extent of the individual tragedies of the victims in this case. The children torn from mothers' arms to be killed, the starving prisoners beaten to death over a period of days with rifle butts, clubs, boots, the women and girls raped and sexually abused over and over, the daily terror of waiting for a bullet or a shell, those who survived physically intact but struggle with the memories of lost loved ones, lost homes, lost communities. The litany of tragedies goes on and on and on. No one can fathom the extent of the sufferings for which Ratko Mladić is responsible. So in the face of that, what does one say and what must one ignore to argue that Mladić should receive less than the most severe sentence? You say, as we see at paragraph 3394 of the defense brief, that Mladić's sentence should be reduced because of his quote-unquote benevolent treatment, unquote, of victims. For example, he, quote, facilitated the achievement of an agreement on the demilitarization of the areas of Srebrenica, Žepa, thus reaffirming his will to establish peace and the applicability of the Geneva Conventions, unquote. And you ignore that this was forced on him, as he complained in P 1793, quote, if the international community had not meddled, they, that is Muslims, would have paid the price, unquote. And you ignore that he chafed under this restraint, as he told his companion on the tour of destroyed Muslim villages that we saw in the video on Monday morning. If the international forces, now the Dutch, quote, would not protect them, they, Muslims, would have disappeared from this area long ago, unquote. And you ignore his relish at finally overcoming the restraint when he entered Srebrenica. Now the time has come to take revenge on the Turks. Or you claim, Your Honors, that his sentence should be reduced because he purchased candy for children in Potocari. That's at paragraph 3397. And you ignore that this alleged purchase of candy was for the kids whose fathers, uncles, and brothers he was about to murder. Or you assert that his sentence should be limited because of alleged SFRY sentencing practices. And you ignore that 4 of Mladić's subordinates, Popović, Beara, Tolomir, Galić, received life sentences for executing his orders for only a fraction of the crimes for which he is responsible. Sentences that were affirmed on appeal. You try to paint Mladić as a man who, quote, never intended to cause suffering, unquote, but instead, quote, took concrete steps to avoid suffering where possible, unquote, and that the conduct of the accused has saved many lives, and therefore a reduction of sentence is warranted. That's at paragraphs 3395 and 3398. And you ignore that this is not the first time that Mladić has tried to depict himself as a saver of lives. Recall P1147, that's a video, V0009268, at 7:41 through 8:42. That's video footage from Žepa in 1995 of General Mladić ostentatiously boarding buses to advise the petrified occupants in the process of being expelled that, quote, "Now I am giving you your life as a gift. I forgive you all and am giving you your life as a present," unquote. Ratko Mladić, the master of life and death, basking in self-praise and demanding gratitude from those whose lives he decided to spare. And now here in court, denying responsibility for those he did kill, blaming the subordinates who executed his orders and deservedly received the most severe sentence possible for doing so. Because the magnitude of these crimes admit of nothing more than the most severe penalty available under law, the only thing one can really argue in support of a sentence less than that most severe is that he didn't commit the crimes. And so that is what the defense does in its sentencing submissions, arguing at paragraphs 3393 and 3401 that, quote, "Any crimes that may have been committed were the result of disobeying individuals acting outside of their duties," unquote. Or that General Mladić was, quote, "a professional with knowledge of the laws of war that he always sought to apply in the most ethical manner," unquote. But these crimes did occur. They happened to one person after another, one person at a time. One father, one wife, one grandmother, one tradesman, one student, one doctor. One after another, after another, after another. And at paragraph 1743 of our brief, you can find just the tiniest fraction, representative fraction, of illustrations reflecting both the vulnerability of these victims and the depths of the suffering they endured and continue to suffer. The time has come for General Mladić to be held accountable for those crimes against each of his victims and the communities he destroyed. It would be incompatible with tribunal sentencing practice, an insult to the victims, living and dead, and an affront to justice to impose any sentence other than the most severe available under law, a life sentence. Thank you, Mr. President. Your honors, that concludes the prosecution's submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Tiga. We'll in a second adjourn for the day. Is there any chance that a response to the latest sentencing-related motion of the defense would be received
Yeah, that has
before
been
Friday?
certainly before Friday. That has been our objective. We'll try to get it out today, and if not, first thing tomorrow morning. I think we can achieve that.
Yes.
Would that be sufficient time for the court?
Yes, I think most important is that if we have received a response, we can consider it. And
Of
I've
course.
got no idea what the response will be, but it may have an impact on what the defense wants to use in their final argument.
As I say, if at all possible, we'll get it out, we'll hit file today, and if not, the first thing tomorrow morning.
Then we'll adjourn for the day and we'll resume on Friday the 9th of December, 9:30 in the morning in this same courtroom 1.
All rise. Veuillez vous lever.